Howdy folks, Tex Grebner here with Tex Grebner Outdoors. I hope you guys are ready for your Tex Grebner Outdoors Saturday morning cartoon awesomeness. I'm back. It is time for Illinois Archery Season 2022. As I promised, some of you thought that I was dead or that I quit. Not dead, just my inner child. Kind of like Robin Williams playing a grown-up Peter Pan in that movie Hook. Not a whole bunch of fun in Never Never Land lately, but I'm back. Here it is, the visceral mystery, the slow descent into madness. Is this the year that I break the whitetail curse? Wiley Coyotee is my spirit animal. He gets beat up, but he never gives up. You'll just have to watch and see. And I know a lot of you guys have been looking forward to this video. If you want to support the channel in a way beyond simply watching the videos, go to TexGrebnerOutdoors.com, check out the Make It Weird sticker, the Make It Weird shirt, the Life Ain't Like the Pornos, Hunting Ain't Like the TV Show shirt, because by God ain't that the truth. I bring you reality here on Tex Grebner Outdoors, but my personal favorite is the Kill with Sticks shirt. Now if you want a discount on all your trad life supplies, use the code TexGrebner in your checkout at threeriversarchery.com. On orders over $100, it will give you free shipping. You're probably going to be spending that anyways, so you can show your support for TexGrebnerOutdoors.com by using my code. If you're in the market for some high-end hunting ammunition between 30-06 all the way up to 505 Gibbs, or you want to take a 12 gauge and make it be able to kill a rhino, check out my friends over at Aria Ballistic Engineering. If you want to armor the front of your arrow, use the code TGO10 at ethicsarchery.com for 10% off your purchase price. I can honestly say that I have never had an ethics reinforced arrow fail from the insert backward into the arrow. Now with that all being said, I hope that you guys are going to enjoy this week's episode of Tex Grebner Outdoors, Illinois Archery Season 2022. I've been on YouTube a real long time, like since the very beginning. Back when I started YouTube, it was outlaw indie creators, independent studios on one side of the spectrum, and it was, Simpsons bootleg episodes and amateur porn creators on the other side of the spectrum before the sanitization of the internet happened. And I've been around to see it go from an outlaw indie platform to indie creators being outcompeted and essentially silenced by a corporate Orwellian media state, in theory. Now, because I've been on YouTube for that long, the truth is, I've seen some of the worst the internet can throw at a person through my mistakes and just through the plain malice of other people. And because of that, I find myself very reluctant to share things about my real life and show any level of vulnerability, because people are either going to let you know how you shouldn't be feeling, or people are going to take your vulnerability and the information and try and hurt you with it in real life just through pure malice. So it's been difficult to make videos and be motivated over the past several years because I've had a lot go on in my life. I have lost grandparents. I had to deal with the whole ball of wax that was 2020. Basically went into 2020 like Mad Max, pretty fit, pretty high strung, pretty motivated. Came out the other side, went from Mad Max to like Rooster Cogburn. I lost a lot of fitness, and essentially I found myself being socially traumatized by watching people pretty much eat each other in the street socially. So I went into 2020 Mad Max, came out the other side of it like Rooster Cogburn. Also, dealing with my dad's cancer over the past couple of years has been hard, and trying to balance getting a new job at a grain elevator and then balance that with still helping out through family duty on the family farm, and trying to balance that with finding time to get out to the woods. But as long as I have an account to post from, I'm still living the dream, even though on an almost monthly basis I get password recovery attempts trying to hack my account, and on an almost daily basis I get financial fraudulent phishing emails trying to access my financial information and commit fraud against me. So, real life is complicated. The truth is, when I started on YouTube, it was the Wild West, and I have seen it evolve. When I started on YouTube, it was like the cyberpunk version of Deadwood, South Dakota, 1876. As I mentioned, I have to balance working a full-time job now with also helping out on the family farm, basically being free labor. And it's time for fall working livestock, weaning off the calves, doing castration, dehorning. Luckily, most of our Charolais Angus cross commercial animals are polled, which means that they don't have horned genetics because they've been selectively generationally bred so that you don't have to dehorn. But pretty much sorting off the cows from the calves that are headed to the feedlot, and going over the cows to make sure that everybody's okay going into the next calving season, and going over the calves as well as they go into the feedlot. Now, if you've never worked around animals that are bigger than you, here's some real good advice. You can make an animal that is bigger than you do anything that it already wants to do. Now, our animals get handled enough that they're not completely feral, but large animals can be dangerous and they demand your respect. They won't just kill you, but they 100% can kill you if they decide they want to. So you really got to show them respect. Then again, I grew up with 2 blue heeler cattle dogs and grew up chasing animals that were 4 times the size of me. But if you've ever worked cattle, you'll understand what I mean when I say that it is a good day if nobody gets hurt and nobody gets yelled at, because it is a high stress environment with a lot of different variables. But pretty much this cuts into my deer hunting possible time, because we always do the weaning in the fall right at the beginning of October, which obviously is deer season. And that also complicates my hunting, because not only am I having to deal with this, I also have the hours at the grain elevator. Now, normal grain elevator hours are going to be about 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. Harvest hours are going to be about 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. 12-hour shifts. Now, that's going to be about 6 days a week, and then probably Sunday, depending. So the irony is there's a heck of a lot of overtime, but you basically lose all your overtime in taxes. Now, if you're not familiar with how a grain elevator works, it's a grain storage facility. The grain goes down into a pit after you crank the truck. There is a conveyor in the pit beneath the truck that brings it to a leg that takes it up another conveyor, and in the case of corn, it is dropped into a wet tank that then has another conveyor that will take it to another leg that will then put it into a grain dryer, which is like a huge oven that will dehydrate the corn so that it will have a longer shelf life without rotting and be easier to store. It'll come out of the grain dryer and then go up another leg, elevator, and then be taken on a conveyor and dropped into a dry tank, which we call bins or silos. We just call them tanks in grain. Now in the case of beans, beans come out of the field normally dry enough that you can just run fans on them. So when you dump beans, you dump them out of the truck into the pit. The conveyor takes it from the pit into the leg takes it up, dumps it into another conveyor that takes it into a dry bean tank. But there's a whole bunch of hurry up and wait. And there's also a whole bunch of long hours. And there's a whole bunch of different ways to die working in a grain elevator, because it's essentially the Midwest equivalent of being a coal miner. I am not a very successful deer hunter. I will say that I'm a good deer hunter, but I'm not a very successful deer hunter. I have a certain level of pride in how many times I have failed without quitting to accumulate the knowledge of deer hunting that I actually have. Now, there's an awful lot of successful whitetail hunters out there that don't know their ass from a hole in the ground when it comes to deer hunting. And I don't begrudge them their success. But if you don't fail, you don't learn. And they don't know anything because they didn't have to learn. Their circumstances allow them to walk through the woods ignorant and get up in a stand that somebody else put there and be successful. Now, Illinois is a no-bait state, and I don't begrudge anyone their success hunting over bait. And like I say, I don't begrudge people their own success. But I do feel that I don't get enough credit for how many times that I can fail without quitting. Because quite frankly, I don't really enjoy deer hunting. I do it because it's what I can do. It's what I have to hunt. And honestly, I do love it. When I'm at work, when the season's over with, all I can think about is the next season. All I can think about when I'm at work is what might be happening out in the deer woods. Then you get out there, you probably kick 3 or 4 deer out of the field on your way into your stand, climb up in your stand with maybe a couple hours worth of daylight left, and you think, shit, I ain't gonna see jack crap. Why did I want to be out here? Because hunting is a visceral mystery, and you never know what's gonna happen on a hunt. A lot of tree stand hunting is, as I've said many years in a row, is a high stakes game of whack-a-mole. Because deer are wild and free, majestic creatures, and they're going to do what they want to do when they want to do it for whatever reason or lack of reason that they want to do it for. Now, there's different stages to the deer season. There's the early season, there's the pre-rut, then there's the rut, and the post-rut, and then there's the late season. And the truth is, here in Illinois, there's mosquito season, and the whole rest of the season, it's too cold to enjoy it. But sometimes if I don't have the time to actually get out, I will actually practice shoot and make sure that I'm still going to be able to send arrows where I want to. Between the insane hours that I put in at the grain elevator dealing with livestock and other family farm responsibilities, my early season's pretty screwed. But the early season is my favorite part of deer season. It is my favorite part of Illinois archery season because everything is lush and green and beautiful, and the weather still feels like August even though it's October. Something that I really miss about a former stage of my life is being able to stay up all night on, say, a Friday or a Saturday night and just go to the deer stand without sleeping. Sit up there, watch the sun come up over the green leaves, and obviously not come home with anything, but drop a 5-hour energy at the gas station after I got out of the woods. And of course, now that I have to be a responsible grown-up with a day job, I can't afford to mess up my circadian rhythm like that. But you never know when the good old days were till you're long past them. There is something so primal and visceral and intimate about going into the woods and hunting with a spear. Unfortunately, in Illinois, I can't actually spear hunt for whitetail in Illinois, even though I wish I could. Something that I'm tired of is the narrative of, oh, crossbows, they're too high-tech, they don't belong in bow season. But yet these same people won't advocate for more primitive methods of take. For instance, like spear hunting. Oh, crossbows, they're too high-tech. Oh, spears, they're too primitive, they're too savage, the public wouldn't like it. Well, the anti-hunters already hate us. So if you expect me to get on board with your crossbow bigotry, you better start advocating for the more primitive styles of hunting, especially because, and I'll never claim not to be a terrible person, it drives me up a wall when somebody that's a compound bow hunter gets on a podcast with their space-age bow and starts talking about how primal it is. Yeah, I can show my bow to somebody in the Amazon or Papua New Guinea, and they're going to know what it is just by looking at it. They aren't going to recognize that alien steampunk technology with the wheels. And I'm not shitting on compound bow hunters in the slightest when I say this, but there are different levels of bow hunting, because bow hunting, even with a compound bow, is still more primal than hunting with a gun. And having hunted with also a spear, I can say that it is that much more intimate and primal and a more visceral experience. The reason that I bring that up is because I know some of you are chomping at the bit to know what my setup is. And the simple answer is, it doesn't matter what you take into the woods with you, whether it's a gun, a bow, a crossbow, or a spear, or you don't take anything in with you, if nothing shows up within range of you to actually get a good shot off. None of that matters. But because I know you're chomping at the bit to know what I'm using this year, what my setup is, I'm using Serious Archery Products Apollo shafts that are a 204 inner diameter. They're a .200 spine. And I'm using the Ethics insert-outsert steel-steel combination, 5-inch shield cut feathers, and I'm using the Three Rivers Archery reflective white arrow wraps. At this point in the season, I'm still using Day 6 4-blade broadheads. I'm using a Selway quiver, and this year I got kind of a signature bow made from Bivouac Bow Company called the Outlaw. It's got bamboo limbs and real fancy wood, and it has a 80-pound draw at 27 inches, and it is a 58-inch recurve. But it doesn't matter what you take in the woods if nothing shows up. I feel like I might have a lot better luck if I could actually spot and stalk whitetail. However, because I'm trying to film, it's a practical necessity to have a deer stand that I can mount my cameras on. Because GoPros don't handle distance detail very well at all. They're great for spear throwing ranges when you're really up close, but they don't handle bow hunting ranges very well at all for point of view filming. So it's very frustrating to me to be in a hurry to get up in my deer stand and kick deer out ahead of me to get to my stand, knowing that I'm at the point of no return because I've got to get up in my stand, and knowing them deer ain't going to come back to where I kicked them out of. Now, a lot of people would say, oh, well, why don't you go in a different way? And that's stupid, because if I could access the property from a different direction, why the hell wouldn't I already be doing that? It's like people asking me why I quit using buck lure and why I don't really use deer calls anymore. Well, if I'd had success with them and that they worked in my situation, then why the hell wouldn't I be using them? I know that sounds terrible to talk to a viewer that way, but if I were as dumb as I looked, I couldn't tie my work boots in the morning. But every day of hunting is exactly the same. And every day of hunting is just a little bit different. It's a high-stakes game of whack-a-mole, and Wiley Coyotee is my spirit animal, I tell you what. And the whitetail curse goes on. The slow descent into madness has officially begun. Hurry up and wait. Hurry up to get in your stand. Wait on deer not to show up. Hurry up and wait when it comes to agriculture. You hurry up to work your ground and get your crops planted. And you wait until your harvest, and then it's time to hurry up and get your harvest in. Hurry up and wait at a grain elevator. You hurry up to dump your trucks as fast as you can. You wait on the next round of trucks. And not to over-dramatize, but I did mention that there were a lot of ways to get killed doing my job. You're working long hours. The farmers are putting in long hours. Everybody's tired. Everybody's stressed. It's not uncommon for knockdown dragouts to happen at grain elevators because everybody's all keyed up. As well as the fact that in addition to being tired and stressed, you're also working around people that are tired and stressed. And those tired and stressed people are driving heavy equipment. So you've got tractors hauling wagons, big semi-tractor trailers, old farm dump trucks that are probably not in the best of repair. So you got to worry about getting driven over. You got to be worrying about getting crushed against the walls. You've got to worry about grain dust explosions from either an arc flash from an electrical switch causing a fire and an explosion, or a bearing heating up on a conveyor and then causing an ember that becomes a flame that causes an explosion. Grain engulfment. You've got to worry about getting wrapped up in an auger, falling off a catwalk. There's a whole bunch of different ways to buy the farm. So you've either got the time to do what you want or you got the money to do what you want. So because I've got more money, unfortunately I have less time than I used to. So the season's going about like how you would expect it to go. So I've still got to work today. Don't have time to go sit in a stand right now, but I am going to go do some scouting. Got the camera on the trekking pole, got the GoPro, going to take the bow. I've got my tactical moccasins on, the Bellevue mini mills. All animals have needs. We eat, we sleep, we drink, and we mate. And because of those needs, we develop habits and patterns. Deer hunting, in theory, isn't all that hard. What you have to do is figure out where the deer want to be, figure out how they're getting there, and set up your ambush alongside of where they're going to be traveling to get from where they are to where they want to be. And that is incredibly simple in explanation, very difficult at times in execution. And so I decided that most of my stands were really good stands. I knew that deer were going to walk by them. The problem was these stands had been set up when I was still more of a morning hunter, when I was still going out in the mornings. That was problematic now that I was much more of an evening and afternoon hunting style. So I decided that I was going to scout out a new tree where I knew that there might be some better deer activity that would be a little bit more low impact. Thing is, how many times have we as deer hunters set up a deer stand, climbed up in it, and as we watch and wait and listen, we're looking around and we think, oh, that tree right over there. And it's a tree like 10, 15 yards away from you. And you're like, that'd be a perfect tree for a stand. And you're looking at the ground and you start to see high traffic areas pop out of the grass. At least you'll know if you've got decent field craft to be able to read sign. And you're like, is it worth climbing down, taking this down and moving it over there? It's probably worth it, but you're not going to do it. One of the most frustrating things, and why I say that it's a high-stakes game of whack-a-mole, is sitting in a stand and literally watching deer walk by a stand that you aren't sitting in, but you know that it's a good stand. It's verification of a hypothesis. You're just observing it rather than participating in it. So I had some disposable income. I decided that I was going to order a stand on Amazon, put it together at work on my breaks, and then go out and set it up. When we're setting up a deer stand on a tree, we want to make sure that we find a high traffic area. We want to make sure that we find a tree that's going to be big enough for us to safely hang a stand on. We want to make sure that that tree is also alive and doesn't have any widowmakers, dead branches, etc. that are going to fall down and kill us. But sometimes the problem isn't finding a tree that's big enough. The problem is finding a tree that is too big. So because of the size of the tree, this giant white oak tree, this big majestic bastard, I had to pack in a double ladder stand, 2 camera arms, which are actually 4 camera arms combined into 2, a tree stand bow hanger, a whole bunch of ratchet straps, and also, meanwhile, keeping in mind I'm doing this in the dark by headlamp on a cold night, pack in an extension ladder from work because this tree was too big for me to even get a lineman's belt on. But I felt like it had a lot of promise. The moon was full, it was early November, the early season was over, the weather was getting colder, and the days were getting shorter, and that meant that the rut was coming up. The harvest was winding down, which meant that I could actually take some half days as a foreman to actually be able to go out and do some serious deer hunting in the rut. But Wiley Coyotee is my spirit animal, and you never know what's going to happen on a hunt. Deer are wild and free, majestic creatures, and hunting is a visceral mystery. And despite what you might have heard, life ain't like the pornos, and hunting ain't like the TV shows. So the good news was, with the harvest winding down, I could actually go hunting. The bad news was, financially, every time that I'd take off work and go hunting, I felt like I was sitting up in my tree stand rolling cigarettes out of $20 bills. But I was so excited to actually be able to get out. Because as much as I complain about it, whitetail hunting and traditional bow hunting in general is an all-consuming passion with me. I feel like I miss out on other hunting opportunities through my quest to break my whitetail curse. I really miss squirrel hunting. I used to love squirrel hunting. And every deer hunter knows that the squirrel is the bane of your existence, because a half-pound squirrel behind you can sound like a 200-pound doe. Now let's face it, if I went out with a .22, I could stack squirrels up, especially in these woods, like they were split firewood. However, because the gods of the hunt have a cruel sense of humor, it would be the time that I went squirrel hunting that I ran into the biggest deer that I would have ever seen. So I don't really squirrel hunt anymore. I never really got into waterfowl hunting, and there aren't really all that many pheasants around to hunt out in the wild anymore. Every day of hunting is exactly the same, but every day of hunting is just a little bit different. Same primal emotions, same quest for success, different sights, different sounds. It's always a brand new adventure. Days are getting shorter, weather's getting colder, pre-rut's over, rut's starting up, and everybody loves the rut. But the rut kind of complicates things because, yes, deer are more likely to be active in the daylight and bucks are more likely to be reckless. But when those hormones start flying and we go from the need for food and water into the Darwin imperative of breeding, it makes the deer less predictable, even if it makes them more active. So everything that you thought you might have had figured out gets thrown out the window with the randomness of mating and fertility. It's always a brand new adventure. Now there's nothing dumber than a 2-year-old buck following a doe's trail, but there is nothing smarter than a 6-year-old doe. That nanny doe will bust you for no apparent reason other than because some wood spirit told her that you were there at 200 yards. Now with the weather getting colder, that presents another set of challenges because as a traditional bow hunter, you have a pretty obtuse string angle. So the more layers of clothing that you put on, the more difficult it becomes to be effective and accurate with your archery equipment. Because you have to worry about hitting your sleeve. Your arms don't have nearly as much dexterity and range of motion when you have that many layers on. So it does bring difficulty to it, in addition to the difficulty of just dealing with the elements in general. There is a terrible beauty to the Midwest in autumn and winter because it is majestic, but it's very desolate. Sitting, watching, waiting, and listening, having a heart attack every time a squirrel scampers through the leaves, and wondering if this might be the year that I break the whitetail curse. Wondering if my stands are in the right spots and if I'm going to be at the right place at the right time. And experiencing nature as an active participant in the visceral mystery of the hunt, rather than just experiencing it as an observer. Then again, it doesn't matter what you take in the woods with you if you take nothing out of the woods with you. I'm a very introspective person, and that sometimes makes going hunting hard, because I hate when people say, oh, you should meditate. No. Meditation, as it is practiced in the West, is a socially acceptable form of procrastination. The last thing that I need as an introspective person is more time alone with my thoughts. There is a concept in bullfighting, and you're familiar with it if you've ever read any Hemingway. The moment of truth. When the matador plunges the sword into the bull, where life and death hang in the balance. Has he done his job correctly? And in the interest of introspection in the moment of truth, you always wonder if you're as good a shot as you think you are. If something shows up, are you going to be able to make the shot? The problem is, deer, you can be a great shot on foam, but on a live deer, even if you keep your shit together, the way that deer reacts can completely change where your arrow is going versus where it is by the time that your arrow lands. But today was going to be exciting. I got off work because it was snowing and there was nothing really to do. Climbed up, the rut was in full swing, and everything was perfect. The wind was perfect. The weather was cold. I had plenty of daylight. There was snow on the ground. Deer showed up. Everything was perfect. And I thought to myself, can I break the whitetail curse? Is this it? My heart was racing, my hands were freezing, my ears were freezing, my legs were shaking. But at the same time, I was oddly calm. It was time to do business. All I could think was, please don't let a deer behind me bust me. Don't hit my sleeve. Hit my anchor. Pick a spot. I know it's 12 yards or less. I can make this shot. It was time for business. We'll see who the gods favor. Am I about to break the whitetail curse? And in that moment of truth, where life and death hang in the balance, I heard a crack that I thought was me breaking the shoulder of the deer, going into the vitals. And you notice I don't celebrate. I'm in shock. I think it finally worked. I want to let this animal die in peace. And I had absolutely no idea that things weren't going to go my way. And so, trying to be responsible, I sat and I waited, because the last thing that I wanted to do was jump this deer off of its deathbed. Everything told me that I was going to find a dead deer. And it was snowing, so the tracking and blood trailing should be perfectly easy. And then I had a dilemma. I had more arrows in my quiver, and this was a good stand, because as I was waiting to get down, more deer showed up. And I feel foolish because I didn't want to deal with more than one deer that I was going to have to try and recover. And so I watched these deer until almost the edge of dark before they got done feeding on the acorns and moved on. And I could have gotten several other shots, but in the interest of being responsible, I didn't take any of the opportunities that I was given. Sitting in that frozen deer stand and wondering if I finally got to be the hero. Did things finally come together for me? But all skill is in vain if the devil pisses on your luck. So I wait an hour, freezing, just wait. I don't want to do this wrong. I even pass up a shot on a doe out at 30 yards because I don't want to deal with two deer and get blood trails mixed up. And so I wait. And now it's literally about 5 minutes of visible light left. Get down, just ecstatic. I think I've got it made. I think that the curse is finally over. Now, I don't necessarily believe that I'm cursed. It's kind of my joke that I say that I've got a whitetail curse, kind of like the curse of the Cubs. But at the same time, when I explain what went down to you, it's going to sound like some Greek gods in the Iliad level of fuckery. Because I get down and I start following up. Now that deer stood there for a full minute once it got done being spooked. And I expected it to tip over. But then it sauntered up out of the basin and disappeared. I couldn't see it anymore. And I waited because I didn't want to jump it off its deathbed because I thought we had a dead deer. Well, I get down, get my flashlight out, and start walking where I've seen it go. And then I get to where it stood. And I'm expecting to see just this blood-spattered snow. No blood. No blood anywhere. And I heard that snap. A snap that I actually like to hear because it means that in my past experience, I had broken bone, that I had shot high into the shoulder. Well, I walked in the dark with a flashlight, searching all over that section where I thought that the deer might be laid up. Didn't find it. No blood, no nothing. And so I went back to where he stood at and found my arrow. Now, I regret that I didn't have a nocturnal knock in it at the time, but I did pick up the reflective wrap. So I found my arrow. And this is the penetration that I got. I don't even know if I got clear through to the outsert. Now this arrow is fine. There's nothing wrong with this arrow. It's perfectly fine and shootable again. But when I shot, the deer dropped down and back. Now I shot low on purpose, knowing that he was going to drop down, but I hadn't counted on him dropping back. And when he dropped down and back, this day 6 broadhead hit that ball joint and dumped all 85 pounds worth of energy from my bow like a hollow point expanding. And that's all I've got. So I'm not real happy about it because I thought I was going to be a hero. I thought it was over. And it's a Cape Buffalo arrow from here on back. It's an 80-pound draw plus bow. And it was a shot on a 95-pound maybe yearling deer at under 15 yards. And it was a beautiful shot. But strange things happen in the visceral mystery of the hunt. That deer, I am positive, is going to be fine. However, this gets tacked on to the continuing list of my failures. And I don't want to say that I'm upset about it, but I trusted this broadhead and I was wrong. So I'm going to go order some iron will broadheads, because the truth is that's a Cape Buffalo arrow. And that was a 95-pound deer, under 15 yards. And while I don't believe in curses, in truth, the fact that I dumped that arrow into the ball joint, and any other arrow that I have ever shot, any other broadhead, would have killed that deer in that same exact spot. And this one didn't. This is going to sound very broken, and I'm not proud of it, but it's the truth, so I'm going to tell it how it is. I was kind of glad that I was having a break from deer hunting during the shotgun season, because my confidence in my equipment was shot. Now, I talked to a number of high-end broadhead manufacturers and sent them the film of what you just saw. And it didn't give me a dead deer, but it at least made me feel a little bit better that I didn't have delusions of what my equipment should be capable of, when every other high-end broadhead manufacturer that I sent that film to basically said, yeah, that should have been a dead deer. But it wasn't a dead deer. But I also ended up dropping some money and ordering some iron will broadheads, and I got some nocturnal nocks so that I could actually see my arrows on film better later on in the season if I got a shot. Got them from my sponsor, Three Rivers Archery. But I was out of the woods for a while, and I kind of needed the break. But now that we were back, now that it was back to just bow season for a while, the slow descent into madness, the visceral mystery that is the sacred hunt, the high-stakes game of whack-a-mole that is Illinois archery season, goes on. And in spite of Wiley Coyotee being my spirit animal, the one thing that you can say for the character of Wiley Coyotee is, he might get messed up, but he never gives up. And I tend to be not so much proud of my failures, but the amount of times that I can fail without actually quitting. Because as much as it is depressing sometimes, I am proud of my tenacity. Of course, once you're on the other side of gun season, once the woods have been a blaze orange battleground, the deer have been shot at, or at least seen a lot more people. They are a lot more keyed up, and they're a lot more clued in. The rut might be winding down depending on how many does have been bred and how the cycling's happening. The weather's going to be turning even colder than it already has been. So naturally, that's going to shift the need from breed into feed. So you might think you've got deer figured out in the early season. Everything goes crazy during the rut where they're completely unpredictable. Then they've been shot at in the gun season, so they're unpredictable and very wary. And now they're switching from the need to breed into the need to feed. And so their patterns are going to become even more different. I call hunting a visceral mystery. Your viscera is your guts. So hunting is in modern terms, since we aren't necessarily subsistence hunting, is like a violent interpretation of a Zen search for enlightenment. We have human thoughts, emotions, feelings, and sensations. It is the closest that we can come in a chemical approximation to a deep connection with our ancestors in a lot of ways, because time changes, but as long as we've been human, what makes us human doesn't change. And the hunt is a common thread clear back through time, long older than from when we struck fire from the living rock. With that being said, hunting being a visceral mystery, it is something that we feel in our guts. It is a visceral experience that, if you're successful, can be incredibly violent, but at the same time, it's a mystery because there's so many pieces that we have to put together as hunters in order to be successful. And obviously, I'm not a very successful hunter. I'm a very dedicated hunter, but I'm not very successful. So we have to piece together this mystery of predictions, thoughts, hopes, prayers to whatever gods might be listening or whatever you feel like praying to, for your luck and for your skill, and figure out where these animals are going to be and how you can get there ahead of them and outsmart them, which obviously after shotgun season happens in the Midwest, that becomes incredibly more difficult because the deer are switched on. But it is a visceral mystery. And it's also a mystery why in modern times we feel called to still take part in the hunt. Why do we go out? And truthfully, I honestly have no idea. Because it's very difficult not to feel an overwhelming sense of futility and an overwhelming sense of just depressed dread of failure. Now, hunting being a visceral mystery, you never know what's going to happen on a hunt. You have to be there, experience it, and live it. And you never know until you've done it how it's going to go. Because there's so many possible outcomes. Yeah, sure, you can have a pretty good idea of how things are going to go down. In my case, that normally means leaving the woods empty-handed and not seeing anything but maybe, if I'm lucky, a squirrel, those little bastards. But at the same time, there's always the unknown unknowns that you can't predict, that leave you hope. And let's face it, ladies and gentlemen, hope is the lie that gets you out of bed. Watching, waiting, listening, and wondering if I'll have another chance to break the whitetail curse. The weather turning colder and colder as the season progresses. Now, even though I feel a sense of futility as deer season wears on and the slow descent into madness continues, I also can't help but have that little shred of hope that says maybe, just maybe, I might get lucky. Because you never really know. Of course, with that being said, I also wonder, why the hell do I even want to do this? And then a squirrel will rustle the leaves, and your heart will jump into your throat, and you'll think, yes, 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 this is why I'm here. There are very, very high highs in the visceral mystery of the hunt, and there's also incredible crushing lows. Now, the funny thing is, a lot of times, I don't actually want to go out. I have to make myself go out hunting. especially after the second shotgun season is over and the deer are on the winter range and the winter pattern and the weather is just absolutely miserable to endure. But I still go out because every day of hunting is exactly the same. The same thoughts and emotions, the same feelings, the same predictions, the same prayers. But every day of hunting is just a little bit different. And it is a visceral mystery. You've probably noticed that I'm not really wearing my original cowboy hat anymore. Mostly because it's pretty tattered and fallen apart, and at this point it's a keepsake. But everything that happened to that hat happened to it with my head still in it. But you've also noticed that I'm not really wearing my hat in the stand anymore at all, as I've got more layers on. And since this newer cowboy hat isn't completely broken in yet, I decided that I didn't want the brim of my hat to bunch up against my ponytail and the extra layers that I was wearing. Because, let's face it, in Midwestern whitetail archery hunting, after you hit December, the goal switches from getting a deer to realistically surviving the rest of the season and to be able to keep going out. It switches from you versus the animal to you versus the elements. Funny thing is, most of the time the deer might be on the other side of the creek. And if you're hunting in a more southern latitude, in a more gentle climate, you might think, well, why don't you just go across the creek? Well, here in the Midwest, the last thing you want to do is get wet and then go sit in a deer stand. That is not good. Even if you are wearing wool, you're still going to be miserable. You may say, oh, why don't you wear hip waders? There ain't nothing colder and nothing louder walking into your stand than walking in wearing hip waders. So that's why I haven't been wearing the cowboy hat. Now you also might have noticed that I have added another tree stand to my stable. Funny thing about that is that I literally, a couple of trees over, had a stand on a tree on that side of the field and had taken it down and moved it. But I keep seeing deer over there when I'm over here. And so I decided, you've either got the time to do what you want or the money to do it with. Okay, while I'm at work, making money, thinking about hunting, I'm going to get 4 camera mounts and bolt them together to make 2 camera mounts, a hard camera and a fluid camera. Going to get a ladder, going to get a tree stand obviously, put it together, borrow the extension ladder from work and put it up on this big oak tree that I had that particular stand in. Don't worry, you'll see it again. But while my hopes for my season drop rapidly as it gets closer to Christmas, I kind of console myself with the fact that I know that I got a shot out of one of my stands at a deer this year. So I know that it's in a good location. I have verified that stand. This stand here, I feel like has the potential within the season to produce. There is something terrible and beautiful about a Midwestern whitetail hunting winter, because it can be so absolutely desolate and miserable just listening to the wind whistle through your ears. But the second a leaf rustles, you get a full body blush and you just have that adrenaline rush of anticipation. If the squirrels are laid up for the winter for a while, it might be nothing. But just like with the monster in the closet or being scared of the dark, it's not necessarily what you see that you've got to worry about. It's what you can't see that your mind will tell a story to you with. Christmas Eve in the deer stand, hoping for a Christmas miracle. Writing letters to Santa in my head. Dear Santa, all I want for Christmas other than a double rifle is a 12-point buck. But not just any 12-point buck. That 12-point buck needs to have found somebody's pot gummies they threw out the window in a ditch and ate enough of them to stumble in front of my stand and not care that I'm sitting there. Stand still and pretty for the camera and stand still long enough for me to get an arrow through his lungs and his heart and out the other side. And then for my equipment to hold up and for there to be enough snow on the ground that I can follow a red teardrop blood trail and finally break the whitetail curse. Can we make that happen, Santa? We can always hope, because there's different stages to a season. You start out looking for a trophy class deer and hoping for a trophy class deer. And when you get on the wrong side of Christmas, all you want is a deer. At a certain point in the season, it becomes less about you versus the animal and more about you versus the elements. So you might have noticed that I'm kind of wearing like a ranger cloak from Lord of the Rings, because I got a hold of some Nepalese wool blankets that I can wrap up in the stand wearing to be able to stay just as warm but wear less layers and hold in more heat, because it's very difficult when you're wearing bulkier winter clothing for the elements to efficiently draw and accurately shoot your bow. Speaking of you versus the animal, it was time for halter breaking and training to lead the replacement heifers. The replacement heifer process goes something like this. We have a show judge come out and pick out the best commercial characteristics of the heifers and narrow it down to a certain amount of replacement heifers that we're going to want to replace cows that have gotten too old to rebreed, or they've lost enough teeth where their food isn't going to be processed very well. That's called smooth mouth. So we have them select the best commercial characteristics and narrow it down to a small group that we need to replace with. And then out of that group, we have a veterinarian come out and we do pelvic measurements to make sure that the pelvic opening inside is wide enough for a calf to be able, when this first calf heifer is going to be mature and subsequently as a cow, that she's going to have an easy birth for Darwinistic characteristics that allows us to combine commercial performance and ease of calving. Now you can make an animal bigger than you do anything that it already wants to do. And trust me, an 800-pound, 11-month-old replacement heifer, she can break every bone in your body if she really wants to, if she gets you up against a gate or a barn wall or down on the ground. Or she can just drag you to death if you get tangled up in the halter rope and don't let go. Personally, I prefer not to let go, because the shame of having let go of the rope is not worth, to me, the potential injury. But that's the replacement heifer process, which kind of cut into my season in the very late season in addition to my hours at work. I hate hunting whitetail in the late season. However, I also take a great pride in my ability to endure the misery that is the tail end of the season. There is nothing fun about sitting in a frozen deer stand looking out on a bleak but beautiful environment that doesn't care about you, wondering if something is going to show up, but hoping that the sun will hurry up and go down so that you can go home and get warm. The irony of me hating hunting in cold weather, at least for whitetail, is the fact that I would love nothing more, well, a few things more, but top of my list of fantasies is taking a trip up to Canada to bow hunt with traditional equipment, wood buffalo in the frozen forests. That is a lot sexier in the imagination than sitting in a deer stand waiting for an animal that probably isn't going to show up. Now, I have a particular coping mechanism that is called, I believe, maladaptive daydreaming, where you take a less than ideal circumstance and you build a fantasy narrative around it in which you are this grandiose protagonist. When you're watching, waiting, and listening in the frozen deer stand, it can be more palatable to fantasize about something like safari or an Amazon adventure, a hot and humid, lush, verdant equatorial place filled with dangerous critters and high adventure. But occasionally, a deer will show up and snap me back into my reality. The irony, the cruel irony, is when the deer is passing by a stand that I have but not in. Because tree stand hunting for whitetail, of course, is a high-stakes game of whack-a-mole. Sitting out in a deer stand, I often think about random things like, what if I found a Sasquatch? I don't really think we've got them around here, but people ask me, do you think that they exist? Could a Sasquatch-like creature have a population within North America? And my answer is interesting before you go thinking that I'm crazy. Yes, where it is logical for them to exist, I feel that it is possible, if not probable, that they could and would exist. However, without a body for scientific classification, we will never have an answer to the Sasquatch question. With that also being said, the person that finally creates that body by killing one will be the messiah of zoology and cryptozoology. And I say messiah because they're gonna get crucified. They might have proved a great truth, but in this current climate, if you were to actually kill a Sasquatch to prove their existence, you will be crucified. And I have a lot of experience in trying to get well-documented animals on film, like the Wiley whitetail, so it makes me very suspicious, knowing how hard that can be, of when you see film of alleged cryptids that looks too good to be true. And I do love spooky campfire stories, and I have an addiction to creepypasta and cryptid stories. But a lot of times when I'm listening to them or watching the documentaries, I find myself thinking, I've watched enough police dog takedown films to know you're not outrunning the North American werewolf back to your cabin. That just probably ain't happening. Water everywhere, but not a drop to drink. Very famous line in literature. In my case, deer everywhere, but none close enough for a shot. We learn things in real time, and we have to adapt to it. And sometimes we learn things too late, and we have to hope that we can apply it the next time that we get a chance to apply it. I feel like I have some really good stand spots, and I feel like I may need to move some stands around before next season. But it was the last day, the last few hours of the archery season, and I managed to make myself go out, because if I was going to fail, I was going to fail with all my heart, knowing that I had hunted and done my best with a persistent commitment to the acceptance of failure. The last hour the last minutes of the last day. And it was ironically amazing, because if you don't know where to start, go back to the beginning. I had had a stand on this tree for years, and I hadn't hunted it in a while. But everywhere I turned, I realized that I probably should have been hunting this stand, because the law of averages might have brought a deer my way on another day at another time. But hunting is a visceral mystery, and you never really know. And as soon as we get near the end of one season, we start thinking and dreaming of the next. As the darkness of the archery season drew on, I found myself reflecting that the whitetail curse was still unbroken, but it was almost like a new beginning, because all the thoughts, dreams, hopes, and prayers, plots, and plans of a hunter can exist. The dreams can live in the darkness before dawn, out in that phantasmagoria of the forest before the daylight of opening day. Well, now you know how it worked out, or rather, how it didn't work out. Overall, I'd say that it was a pretty good season, other than a few hiccups. The whitetail curse goes on. Here we are at the end of it, just in time to start plotting, hoping, and scheming, praying, and dreaming for the next archery season. Wiley Coyotee is still my spirit animal, and the whitetail curse goes on. Now, with that being said, though, as long as I have a channel and a somewhat functioning society crashing down around me, you're still going to get an Illinois archery season no matter what. This was a hard video to make and to be motivated to actually put out. But here on Tex Grebner Outdoors, I bring you reality, good or bad. Life ain't like the pornos. Hunting ain't like the TV shows. And I do the best I can with what I've got. Now, I don't know what YouTube is going to be doing as far as firearms content regulation. I don't know what's going to come of the new Illinois gun control and bans that they're trying to enforce now. I don't know. But I'm just going to have to deal with it as it comes, and we'll just see. But I hope you guys enjoyed watching this week's episode of Tex Grebner Outdoors, and I hope you enjoyed watching Tex Grebner Outdoors Illinois archery season. As always, God bless all my sportsmen of America. Join the NRA to protect our rights. Please check out my friends over at threeriversarchery.com. Thank you very much to those of you involved in law enforcement, you good cops out there, and those of you served in the military ready to die for freedom anywhere. And thanks for watching Tex Grebner Outdoors.